If you jump in money puddles, you must wear your boots.
Hey, what's good, everybody? I wanted to make this video because someone shared that Cardinal video with me. I thought it was really funny. But even, before I get into what I wanted to talk about, even just what the Cardinal means, right? It all went perfect. The Cardinal has to do with staying true to yourself, fighting your own insecurities, all this stuff. It could even mean that a loved one is nearby, which is funny that, I'm making this video on what would have been my brother's birthday, right? He would have been 48 today, right? So, happy birthday to my brother. Um, the Cardinal, in the video, it's fighting itself in the mirror, right? And I thought it was funny because I think not this weekend, probably like the last weekend or something, So it had already been in my head about like my book, right? The 216 book. I went to a party, right? I was invited to a friend's birthday party, another fellow Gemini. My friend Erica, who was also very supportive. I think she was probably the first one that bought the book, or the second, something like that, right? And and then my other friend Edgar, right? Like he was there, and he was selling my book. Like I sold at least 6 books, because of him. Um, and you know, at first he was telling everybody like, hey, you know, oh, my friend wrote a book and this and that. And I told them at first, like, hey man, shut up. Cause I was like, you can't really force this on people because if they're not ready, they're not ready. But it was like I instantly heard myself and I checked myself. I was like, dude, just shut up and just let it be, right? Like, what was I worried about? Because I feel like ultimately whoever's meant to read is gonna read it, right? Like it doesn't even matter now. Like the times we're living in, I think it's just traumas from my past, right? From being young, from growing up that way, growing up around where the spiritual wasn't welcomed, right? Growing, the churches, I always bring that up, and it's never to bash on churches. It was just that was such a traumatizing thing of my experience, right? Being so tuned in spiritually and not having anyone to talk to, even in settings that are supposed to be spiritual, right? Even around family, like all these things that have traumatized me to speak up about the spiritual stuff. So I realized that in me, like me getting in my own way, all that to say, like the way the bird was fighting itself, I thought was comedy, right? It was like, wow, like if that isn't the epitome of like, just like us, right? It's really us fighting ourselves, right? When we have these insecurities. Um, and I thought, I don't know, for some reason it took me back. What if I did get in my way with the music, right? Like I know there were times where but I don't know, somehow it triggered something like maybe me remembering where people will be like, oh yeah, this is my friend, he raps or this and that, and I'd be like, like I wouldn't even, instead of being like, yeah, I got a CD here, you want to buy one? I was always more like, they're like, almost like, I don't know, maybe trying to be humble, but I didn't need to be, right? Because that's what I did. I was getting in my own way of I guess attaining success, maybe. For some reason it triggered all that. And I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna make the same mistake again, right? Like I wrote the book, obviously, like I got nothing to hide anymore at this point, right? Like it's out there. I even made the audio book, translated it in Spanish. I just finished another book which goes even way more into things. So it's just that video being shared with me was the perfect thing, right? Like the Cardinal, right? Fighting itself. It's just comedy, right? And that's and even right now, as I hit record, I noticed like I'm wearing like red and I don't know, almost like the same colors as the Cardinal, right? So I was just like, that's funny, like all the synchronicities, right? I didn't even think about it to after, right? Like out of all the shirts I could have worn, right? But yeah, the lesson is like stop fighting yourself. I've even done it. I don't want to make that same mistake again, right? Like let's just say, I always like there are different things, right? That was always a big thing in my life, right? About the music, even that, right? I did have, not to go like it's not a pity party thing, right? I acknowledge like I didn't get support from people that were close to me, and I don't know if that traumatized me in a way to where I didn't have that to where I wanted to just like tell everybody, which you should have, like when you're especially when you're trying to do something where you're self-employed, right? Like running a business. Like, why wouldn't you take every chance to promote something? Obviously the book, I was guided to do it, right? But it's a whole different like, would it be a career path I would welcome? Yeah, of course. Cause I already wrote this other book. I wrote it within like probably like a week, right? And it's as long as the 216 second edition, right? Cause I wrote the book first and then I wrote a second edition, so all that took at least, I don't know, it took a while, like not a lot, maybe within a month, but nothing compared to like in 1 week, boom, finishing a whole book that's the equal length, right? Of course, the book, this new one that I wrote, it's more about all my experiences, right? I mean, I'll be honest, it's basically gonna be called like my experience with UFOs, God, angels, demons, like boom. And still, it's probably gonna be shorter than what I can actually go into, right? But it's enough that you know like I say, everything that I've experienced, I've always gotten confirmations, right? So where everything was a shared experience. And I share that in the intro, right? I talk about how everything that I've experienced was a shared experience, including if you read my 216 book in the very first story, if I hadn't included that in there, I would have included it in this book. How, one of my first experiences when I stopped doubting things was I prayed a question that I asked, and then it was given to me by someone else that I didn't even know, right? Like I barely knew. I had a new job I had started, like kind of like, oh, hey, what's up, kind of thing. And this person was given the answer to the question I asked God, right? Like, so it was like it does that, like, or that's done in order to not have doubt, right? So to me, I was already groomed in that way to like trust the spirit world, like, and to be braver, right? Because it is the crazy thing is there's so many people already on YouTube with channels and this and that, not to be babbling and stuff, right? But just these are the conflicts too, right? That go on in someone's head when you're trying to like why be nervous? I guess maybe this is the best way I could put it. Since I did grow up, you see a lot of people, I don't know all their backstories, but a lot of them don't seem to be like they grew up in the streets, right? So I had that street background, right? Like, you know, on the way like to be thug life or what I mean, all that, right? Like I always would tell people it was like out of 25 good friends that I had, maybe 20 of them ended up in gangs, right? And maybe there was like, me included with maybe four other ones that managed to, aside from even though living at that, then boom, transition to working and this, which probably saved, I think, all of our lives, right? Me and my other four friends that I saw that didn't really get involved in that stuff, right? Uh After, right? Like after a certain point, boom, then just entering like, oh, well, hustling or this and that. Because sometimes even having kids didn't stop people, you know what I mean? So it was like that, like or in my immediate like of maybe 25 good friends. So even talking about spiritual stuff, no one really, and if there were people that went into spiritual, it was more just like the religion thing, right? Like, oh, they saw something in their life, right? To where they felt like a lot of them will say like Jesus saved their life, right? And so in that way, but it wasn't so much to like, oh, I'm experiencing all these other like nonstop things, right? Like premonitions and this and that and that and this. So it was more of that, right? So even that, like there's never really been, or that I've seen, right? Really people that have like more my kind of background that I've seen or see on YouTube sharing these experiences, right? Or if they have, see if they have had that background, they don't mention it, right? So the same. That's why it's I think been more difficult for me because I mean at one point in my life that's all life was, right? Like, who can be the toughest, who this, who that. So it's not tough to talk about, like, because spiritual is always connected to emotional things, you know what I mean? It's like somehow, some way it's connected to this intuitive stuff and this and that and faith stuff, right? Like as opposed to like, you know, if you're growing up street, you're not like, oh, my faith, it's probably instincts, and but more like muscle, right? The muscle rather than the intuitive part of it, right? I hope that made sense, right? But anyways, it was interesting to not, and of course with the help of friends, right? But not to get in the way, right? Especially that someone trying to be like, oh yeah, my friend wrote a book and this and that, and he managed to sell 6 copies for me and all this and that. So I was like, it was a lesson learned. And then I saw that video within a couple of days after that was shared with me about the Cardinal fighting. And I just thought like, damn, that reminded me of my situation and a lot of humans, right? So I guess the lesson was obviously, right? Don't fight. You're fighting yourself, right? Like, not that nobody really cares, but in a way it's like just do what you need to do. Stop fighting yourself. That's it. That's the person you're fighting. You're fighting yourself. If the other stuff comes, let it come after, right? Like, I don't think, I mean, for the most part, I've never cared about the trolls and stuff online, right? I know some people probably deal with more of that. And so I know maybe, I mean, you shouldn't really, unless someone tries to put physical harm on you, then that's another situation, right? But as far as like, there's really nothing, like, you're fighting yourself, right? So do what you need to do, especially in nowadays doing stuff online and all this, or even that doing stuff in person, right? The worst people could do is say no, which is funny because you know that's why I should be prepared for it now, because even with acting, right, we get rejected nonstop, but for some reason it doesn't click as being rejected because we know it's part of it, right? Like, you'll submit to jobs and it's so second nature. Like, I could submit to like 50 jobs in a day, every day, right? When it was, when it's good right now where there's a strike and then another strike coming and this and that, maybe. But it's like, you know, on when things are regular, it's like I'll be submitting to like 50 jobs in a day. It's like, brum, brum, brum. And if you're lucky, you'll get called back from one, right? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes it'll go a day. Sometimes, there'll be times when you're a whole week, no, nothing. So imagine that was just like, what is it? I can't think, man. 600, three, almost 400 rejections in a week, right? Or something like that. 350 rejections in a week, right? So like that's a lot of rejection. Picture going to somebody asking 350 people for something and they're telling you no to your face. I mean, it's kind of like that. I mean, but it's like it goes with the territory, right? Like you should be able to since I'm already dealing with the rejection every day anyways from then it I guess just because when it's something personal, obviously it affects you more. I don't know why the acting I've never taken it personal. I get it. No, sometimes I mean you could actually when you're in that final slot, right? When you like audition for something and you're in that final, that out of like 1,000 people, you're in that top 10 that you just made it, and then all of a sudden you don't get it. But somehow it's like when you see people like, well, this person, whatever, that was just the look. You're able to deal with it for some reason. It just doesn't bother me like it does when it's something personal, right? So maybe that's the thing. Maybe younger me didn't really like hearing, like you're trying when I would try to sell CDs, and I actually had pretty good luck with selling CDs, right? Because you'd carry around a Walkman, make someone listen to it. That was the funny thing about being young and trying to sell music is that sometimes you had to be a little aggressive and scare people, like listen to my music, and they're like, oh shoot, like if I don't listen to this music, like this person's gonna jump me or something, right? Back in those days, right? But somehow I guess yeah, it got irritating, and maybe it just stayed with me all these years. So now I don't want to get in my way. That's the voice that spoke to me at that moment, at my friend's birthday party where, they were trying to help me sell books and I'm over here like getting in my own way. So that's an important lesson. And as you can see, the cardinal, and the cardinal happens to mean things like that, right? Staying true to yourself. Um, there's nothing. I love that saying. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. I know I babbled on long enough. Just want to share that video. I thought it was hilarious, right? It was funny, and I had just gone through that situation, so all that good stuff, right? I'll put a little more about what the cardinal means right here too. All that good stuff. All right, thanks for watching. Peace.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I wanna feel this way forever.